stopping to look quizzically at his desktop. He chuckled. Section 3. At 15:15, the light on his interphone blinked twice, and Marlowe hastily initialed a directive with his right hand while touching the switch with his left. "Yes, Mary?" "Mr. Meade, sir." "Okay." He switched off, pushed the directive into his outbox, and pulled the GenServe and the folder on Martin Holliday out of the hold tray. "Come in, Chris," he said as Meade knocked on the door. "How are you today, Mr. Marlowe?" Meade asked as he sat down. "4 ounces heavier," Marlowe answered dryly. "I presume you're not. Cigarette, Chris?" Apparently the use of the first name finally caught Meade's notice. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then took a cigarette and lit it. "Thanks, Dave." "Well, I'm glad that's settled," Marlowe chuckled, his eyes almost disappearing in crinkles of flesh. "How's Mary?" Meade grinned crookedly. "Miss Folsom is in fine fettle today, thank you." Marlowe rumbled a laugh. Meade had once made the mistake of addressing the woman as Mary, under the natural assumption that if Marlowe could do it, everyone could. "Mary, I fear," Marlowe observed, "lives in more stately times than these. She'll tolerate informality from me because I'm in direct authority over her, and direct authority, of course, is law. But you, Meade, you are a young whippersnapper." "But that's totally unrealistic," Meade protested. "I don't respect her less by using her first name. It's just friendliness, that's all." "Look," Marlowe said, "it makes sense, but it ain't logical. Not on her terms. Mary Folsom was raised by a big, tough, tight-lipped authoritarian of a father who believed in bringing kids up by the book. By the time she got tumbled out into the world, all big men were unquestionably authority, and all young men were callow whippersnappers. Sure, she's unhappy about it inside, but it makes her a perfect secretary for me, and she does her job well. We play by her rules on the little things, and by the world's rules on the big ones. Capiche?" "Sure, Dave, but—" Marlowe picked up the folder on Holliday and gave Meade one weighty but understanding look before he opened it. "Your trouble, Chris, is that your viewpoint is fundamentally sane," he said. "Now, about Holliday, Martin. Options 062268729, 06310810004. I didn't get time to read the GenServe on the Karlshaven planet, so I'll ask you to brief me." "Yes, sir." "What's 4 like?" "Good arable land, a little mountainous in spots, but that's good. Loaded with minerals, industrial stuff like silver. Some tin, but not enough to depress the monetary standard. Lots of copper, coal beds, petroleum basins, the works. Self-supporting practically from the start. A real asset to the Union in 56 years. Marlowe nodded. "Good. Nice picking, Chris. Now, got a decoy?" "Yes, sir. Karlshaven II's a false E. I've got a dummy option on it in the works, and we'll be able to undercut Holliday's prices for his land by about 20%. False E, huh? How long do you figure until the colony can't stick on it any longer?" "A fair-sized one, with lots of financial backing, might even make it permanently. But we won't be able to dig up that many loafers, and naturally we can't give them that big a subsidy. Eventually we'll have to ferry them all out, in about 8 years, say, but that'll give us time enough to break Holliday." Marlowe nodded again. "Sounds good." "Something else," Meade said. "II's mineral poor. It's near to being solid metal. That's what makes it impossible to really live on, but I figure we can switch the mineral companies right onto it and off of 4. Marlowe grinned approvingly. "You've been saving this one for Holliday." "Yes, sir," Meade said, nodding slowly. He looked hesitantly at Marlowe. "What's up, boy?" "Well, sir," Meade began, then stopped. "Nothing important, really." Marlowe gave him a surprising look full of sadness and brooding understanding. "You're thinking he's an old frightened man, and why don't we leave him alone?" "Why, yes, sir." "Dave." "Yes, Dave, you're quite right. Why don't we?" "We can't, sir, I know that, but it doesn't seem fair." "Exactly, Chris. It ain't right, but it's correct." The light on Marlowe's interphone blinked once. Marlowe looked at it in momentary surprise. Then his features cleared, and he muttered, "Cabbage." He reached out toward the switch. "We've got a visitor, Chris. Follow my lead." He reviewed his information on Duvnalid titular systems while he touched the switch. "Ask Ud Klavan to come in, Mary." Section 4. Dalish ud Klavan was almost a twin for the pictured typical Dovnalid in Marlowe's library. Since the pictures were usually idealized, it followed that Klavan was an above-average specimen of his people. He stood a full 8 feet from fetters to crest, and had not yet begun to thicken his shoes in compensation for the stoop that marked advancing middle age for his race. Marlowe looked at him, smiled inwardly. No Dovnalid could be so obviously superior and still only a lowly student. Well, considering Harrison's qualifications, it might still not be tit for tat. Meade began to get to his feet, and Marlowe hastily planted a foot atop his nearest shoe. The assistant winced and twitched his lips, but at least he stayed down. Dalish ud Klavan, the Dovnalid pronounced in good English. Dave Marlowe, Secretary for External Affairs, Solar Union, Marlowe replied. Ud Klavan looked expectantly at Meade. Christopher Meade, Assistant Undersecretary for External Affairs, the assistant said, orienting himself. If you would do us the honor of permitting us to stand, Marlowe asked politely. On the contrary, Marlowe, if you would do me the honor of permitting me to sit, I should consider it a privilege. Please do so. Mr. Meade, if you would bring our visitor a chair. They lost themselves in formalities for a few minutes, Marlowe being urbanely correct, Meade following after as best he could through the maze of Dovnalid mores. Finally they were able to get down to the business at hand. Ud Klavan sitting with considerable comfort in the carefully designed chair which could be snapped into almost any shape, Marlowe bulking behind his desk, Meade sitting somewhat nervously beside him. Now, as I understand it, Ud Klavan, Marlowe began, you'd like to learn something of our policies and methods. That is correct, Marlowe and Meade. The Dovnalid extracted a block of opaque material from the flat wallet at his side and steadied it on his knee. I have your permission to take notes? Please do. Now, as it happens, Mr. Meade and I are currently considering a case which perfectly illustrates our policies. Ud Klavan immediately traced a series of ideographs on the note block, and Marlowe wondered if he was actually going to take their conversation down verbatim. He shrugged mentally. He'd have to ask him at some later date whether he'd missed anything. Undoubtedly there'd be a spare recording of the tape he himself was making. To begin, as you know, our government is founded upon principles of extreme personal freedom. There are no arbitrary laws governing expression, worship, the possession of personal weapons, or the rights of personal property. The state is construed to be a mechanism of public service, operated by the body politic, and the actual regulation and regimentation of society is accomplished by natural socio-economic laws, which, of course, are both universal and unavoidable. We pride ourselves on the high status of the individual in comparison to the barely tolerable existence of the state. We do naturally have ordinances and injunctions governing crimes, but even these are usually superseded by civil actions at the personal level. Marlowe leaned forward a trifle. Forgetting exact principles for a moment, Ud Klavan, you realize that the actuality will sometimes stray from the ideal. Our citizens, for example, do not habitually carry weapons, except under extraordinary conditions. But that is a civil taboo rather than a fixed amendation of our Constitution. I have no doubt that some future generation, mores having shifted, will, for example, revive the Code Duello. Ud Klavan nodded. Quite understood. Thank you, Marlowe. Good. Now to proceed. Under conditions such as those, the state and its agencies cannot lay down a fixed policy of any sort and expect it to be in the least bit permanent. The people will not tolerate such regulation, and with each new shift in social mores, and the institution of any policy is itself sufficient to produce such a shift within a short time, successive policies are repudiated by the body politic, and new ones must be instituted. Marlowe leaned back and spread his hands. Therefore, he said, with a rueful smile, it can fairly be said that we have no foreign policy, effectively speaking. We pursue the expedient, Ud Klavan, and hope for the best. The case which Mr. Meade and I are currently considering is typical. The Union, as you know, maintains a General Survey Corps, whose task it is to map the galaxy, surveying such planets as harbor alien races or seem suitable for human colonization. Such a survey team, for example, first established contact between your people and ours. Exchange observation rights are worked out, and representatives of both races are given the opportunity to acquaint themselves